The Know Your Foe series continues with one of the first rivalry games we're going to preview this year. Yep, it's that one, the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajiv and Justin, back together for a midweek Know Your Foe episode. This week, talking about the Iowa Hawkeyes. A game last year, Justin, that we definitely want to forget. We lost 42-10 and got, frankly, thumped by Iowa in what was one of the most embarrassing losses that we've had in a while, and I think has really led to our sort of getting larger on the line. Like everything that we've done has really been to get back at Iowa, which was pretty nasty. We have Trent Condon, host of Locked On Hawkeyes. He is going to be joining us here. I'm going to play that interview in a minute, and then we are going to come back and react to it. This is going to be a big game. It's kind of sandwiched in that middle of October. So let's cut now to Trent Condon. All right, we are joined by Trent Condon, host of Locked On Hawkeyes. Go check out everything he's doing. Of course, he does on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Hawkeyes. Obviously, you guys are all fans of Locked On Badgers and what Ryan Herrings does over there. So go check out what Trent does on Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well, getting excited for football season and a little bit of buzz, and we'll hopefully get a good rivalry game between the Hawkeyes and the Badgers again this year.
Well, last year really wasn't a very good one. We got kind of kicked in the teeth, and hopefully, everything we've done has really been to try to not let that happen again. Iowa's obviously made some big moves this offseason as well. The number one name being Mark Gronowski, the transfer quarterback. Let's start there. What is the pulse around the program right now? Do we feel like Gronowski is going to be the guy to really make an improvement at that position, a position that generally isn't one of the strongest for the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of expectations that have come with Mark Gronowski, and it's coupled with year number 2 of Tim Lester. And we saw a season ago after Brian Ferentz was finally let go, the improvements that they made offensively last season. It was mostly in the ground game and what he did, kind of changing the system, what they did with the old zone blocking scheme and implementing West Coast system, the Shanahan offense, and doing it that direction. But they still did it with a decrepit Cade McNamara. And then after McNamara was injured again, and they kept going down the depth chart, they were down to Jackson Stratton at the end of the season. Stratton was a guy that was a walk-on. He was a guy that came in from Colorado State after going 4 of 17, and he was the starter for Iowa's final 3 games a year ago. So now with somebody with Mark Gronowski, with the credentials that he has, coupled with Tim Lester implementing this offense, there is some expectations that, yes, they're going to take a step forward. Iowa last year went from 15 points per game up to 27, and they did it without much of a passing game. You take that next step forward with a competent quarterback this year, and there's a lot of excitement now. It's up to Gronowski to deliver.
Yeah, certainly a lot of excitement around that program, and certainly Gronowski. So you mentioned the changes that were made offensively to the run game. What kind of changes offensively from a passing perspective are you really expecting this season versus last season?
So you start with Gronowski and his ability to go down the field, and that was something that was never a strength with Cade McNamara going back to his days in Michigan. Is he was never a guy that had the powerful arm, the guy that was going to rifle it, the guy that was going to make those big plays, and Gronowski certainly has that kind of ability, coupled with a guy that has some physicality to his running game. So you're also opening up another element that we saw a little bit last year with Brendan Sullivan when he was inserted for McNamara, is he had that running ability. The problem, he didn't have much of an arm. And that was kind of the case in the knock against him when he was at Northwestern and now down at Tulane. Is really good athletic guy, really good runner, not much of a passer. And now you hope that you have the full combination. But the passing game also takes a step forward, is because Iowa, for the first time in a half decade, looks to actually have some depth at the wide receiver position. For so many years, it wasn't just the terrible quarterback play that they were getting. It was also the inability to find wide receivers or have any kind of depth at the receiver position. And Iowa feels really good. Jacob Gill led the team out of the wide receiver group last year. He's back for another season. Just a solid, dependable, knows what he's doing kind of guy at the wide receiver position. Reese Vanderzee had 2 touchdown receptions in his first career game. This is a guy that played everything in high school as a true freshman last year. He went out there, and though he got banged up after the first couple of games of the year, he's an impactful guy. But then you look at the rest of the depth that they have from Seth Anderson, Flipper Anderson's little son, who has been out there. And when he's been healthy, makes plays. Problem is he's rarely been healthy. Well, he's healthy in the spring. He's been healthy in August. And you go through Iowa realistically, and this is crazy because it doesn't happen often. Iowa feels like they have 7-8 guys at minimum that are competent at wide receiver. I think we got to go back to Hayden Fry the last time that has happened.
I mean, that is impressive. Of course, one of the strongest units of your team always is the running game, certainly. So let's talk about that as far as the overall offense. What is the strongest unit on the offense? I mean, you mentioned wide receiver already. And what is the weakest? What's the potential weak point there offensively?
They feel really good about this stable of running backs that they have, the depth that they've also created there. And it's crazy. This might be one of Iowa's deeper teams that they've had. Maybe not some of the top end talent that you're talking about, but in terms of depth at so many position groups. And I think it goes hand in hand with the way that Kirk Ferentz has built this. In today's environment in the transfer portal, is they do have depth at defensive line, at offensive line, at wide receivers, we mentioned. Even in the quarterback room, they have depth there. But I think the biggest concern with this group, and certainly offensively, is the left tackle position. You have an All-American at right tackle in Jennings Dunker. He's not a guy that can flip, though. He's uncomfortable on the left side, so he is stuck there at that right tackle position. You have a potential All-Big Ten player, Logan Jones, who came back for another year at the center position. Bo Stevens, your starting left guard, has started 21 games in his career, and Cade Pieper was the number 6 offensive lineman last year as a redshirt freshman. He's going to be the right guard. Left tackle, though, there's 3 guys vying for it. Bryce George comes in from Ferris State, a D2 All-American, a national champion there, though you can tell he is still a guy learning, moving up to the Big Ten level. The other 2 guys are holdovers. Trevor Lauk, who everybody in the upper Midwest wanted. He had an Ohio State offer. He had a Michigan offer. He's a redshirt sophomore now. Kind of feels like the time is now. I think he's going to be the one that wins that guy a job eventually. Jack Dotzler, another guy that's in the mix there. If they can get Lauk up to speed right away, he's got the highest upside, and then left tackle is figured out. But that is the concern because all those guys have had moments, but all those guys have looked like guys that haven't played a whole lot of Big Ten football.
Switching over to the other side of the ball, one of the staples of any Iowa team is a strong, aggressive defense. Certainly that's been the strength for several years. How is that unit looking this year? What is the strength and weakness on that side of the ball?
A year ago, they brought back 10 starters from the defense, and yet they took a step back. They had some injuries at the defensive backfield. The cornerback position never was able to figure it out. And after being elite and returning so many guys from last year, thought you're just going to be elite again, and they weren't last season. Now, they're still good, but it wasn't to the standards. Now, many of those guys have moved on, including the linebacker group. And I think that is the biggest concern for this team. You lose an All-American in Jay Higgins, who was doing everything for you the last 2 years. Nick Jackson, his running mate. In fact, both those 2 guys were the top-rated players in the preseason week 1 from Pro Football Focus of what they did now with their respective NFL players. And Iowa's got 2 different ways that they can go. They've had a bunch of guys that have waited their turn. Jaden Harrell at middle linebacker. He's a redshirt senior. He's been around for 5 years, has played a little bit, but not a whole lot. Carson Shire's the other one over at the other linebacker spot, another redshirt senior that has waited his spot. When he's healthy, he's tremendous. He's another guy, though, that has never been able to be healthy. And then they got a bunch of redshirt freshmen after that with some high upside. If you saw Bruce Feldman's freaks list, one of those guys showed up in Preston Reese as a redshirt freshman that hasn't played a snap of football yet for the Hawkeyes. And that shows you kind of what's happening in the wings. So I was going to have a decision here. If these veterans aren't doing it right away, do you go to the youth movement at linebacker? That's a concern. And then in the defensive backfield, they're kind of banged up right now. TJ Hall is going to be their top corner this year. He's dealing with a soft tissue injury. Jalen Watson, who's probably going to be their number 3, he was also dealing with something. Deshaun Lee, boy, it seems like every video that we get from camp, the offense is getting behind him, and you're kind of concerned over there. They brought in Shaheed Barrows from South Dakota to also help out there. Doesn't look like it's quite clicked for him coming in from the portal. So linebacker and cornerback, a little bit concerning with this Iowa defense.
But defensive line, you're feeling pretty good about up front.
Excellent. They're going to be really good. Not just the guys that they have up front. Aaron Graves, 6.5 sacks last year, a defensive tackle. That doesn't happen a defensive tackle the way that Iowa plays. Shows you his ability to get to the quarterback. 2 guys that played in backup roles last year, Ethan Herkett and Max Llewellyn, both those guys with 5.5 sacks a year ago. And then the depth that they have. A whole lot of depth at those defensive line spots. They also went to the portal and brought in 2 players to help out with the depth, the defensive tackle. They got guys that have proven that they can do it at the Big Ten level. Now you're asking them to grow into Big Ten roles, but the good news is they're incredibly deep up front. Probably the deepest position group overall is what they have when you're talking about this front four, where they go realistically 9-10 deep, guys that can play right now and help them out.
Well, that's not what I want to hear. I mean, I want to hear that you've got a weakness up there so we can run the ball effectively.
Yeah, not going to happen very much, I don't think, against Iowa this season.
One of the secret weapons of any Kirk Ferentz team is the special teams. You've got a young punter who's obviously strong. It's seemingly Iowa just continues to have great punting, great kick returning. Is that unit looking as strong as it always is? Is that going to be another weapon for you again?
Yeah, the expectations are through the roof. And, going from Tory Taylor, the all-world punter, to Reese Dakin. They go from an Australian to another Australian. But I think some people forget Tory Taylor, when he came to Iowa, he came in 2020. So he went through a season of football with not many people in the stands. He did that playing American football for the first time. He also did it as a 22-year-old freshman. That's when he came over. Reese Dakin last year, he was 19 years old. He was a real freshman, and he had to do it in front of 80,000 people screaming at him. It was completely different, and yet he still averaged 44.5. He was tremendous at the open practice on Saturday, not just the powerful leg that we know that he had, but those little intricacies of the punting game. And then you return an all Big Ten kicker on top of it in Drew Stevens, who was tremendous himself a year ago. Oh, by the way, you look at the return game, Caden Weechen comes back for another year. He was only the Jet Award winner. That is the return specialist of the year in college football. So yes, it's looking like another elite year for Iowa special teams.
He's Weechen is a scary, scary guy back there. There's no doubt about that. Well, Trent, you seem pretty optimistic about this team, and I don't blame you. You've got a decent schedule this year. I mean, you certainly got Penn State, you got Oregon on your schedule. Hopefully we provide some difficulty for you as well. Road trip to Madison's never can be super easy. Give me your floor ceiling prediction and then your official record prediction.
Normally with Iowa, it's pretty easy, right? They're going to be about 8-4. They're maybe going to pull an upset in there, but that's what they're going to be. And then you got those outlier years that go a little bit higher, but rarely very much lower. I do believe that the floor is a little bit lower for this team this year because of the schedule. You mentioned Penn State and Oregon. Iowa's going to be a decided underdog, even in Kinnick Stadium in both of those games. And then you get into the toss-up games. Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa State, Nebraska, Minnesota. All those games are toss-up games that are probably going to come down to a play or two. And when you look at those kind of games, Iowa's been good historically in them, but there are those seasons where it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. And suddenly you go, 1-5 in those one-score games like a team like Nebraska was last year, and you're looking more at a 6-6 type of season. So because of that, I think the floor is a little bit lower, even as high as the expectations are. I'll tell you this. I think Iowa is going to pull an upset in one of those two big games. I think it's going to be against Oregon. You guys almost got the Ducks a year ago, and I think this Iowa team is going to be much better than last year's Wisconsin team. I think they do get the Ducks in Kinnick Stadium in early November. We also know, though, that there's an automatic loss. It's Iowa whenever they have to travel west past Lincoln, Nebraska, and a little bit further less. So when they go out to USC, I mean, mark that as an automatic L in there. I eventually get to 9-3. I think this team's going to be good. I think we're going to be having conversations about, if this team in November can run the table. Can they be a college football playoff team? I think the upside is there eventually, though. I do think they're going to lose the USC game and probably one more. I got the Hawkeyes at 9-3, but with it, I got us winning in Camp Randall.
I can understand that. Now, with your 9-3 prediction, do you think they make the playoffs at that record?
I don't think so. And I think not having Michigan and Ohio State, that's going to be a knock that's going to be used against them. Also, the non-conference. I think they get Iowa State. They haven't lost a name since 2011, even though they've struggled in Kinnick Stadium. They've been able to win that game on the road. I think the non-conference schedule is going to hurt them. And you know how narratives start to build up. And they didn't play Ohio State this year. That's also going to be a part of it, knowing that, yes, this schedule includes 4 teams that won double-digit games a year ago, 3 teams from the college football playoff a season ago. I just don't think it's going to be enough. If I was going to be a playoff team, I think they have to be 10-2.
Fantastic stuff from Trent Condon, host of Locked On Hawkeyes. Go check out his work on YouTube and wherever you can find your podcast. Trent, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the insight.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Trent, for joining us and providing us some insight on Iowa. Justin, I'm going to start here and then turn it over to you and get your thoughts. But look, he's pretty confident about this team. And I kind of understand when you look at who they are returning and the fact that, they're in year 2 now of their offensive coordinator, Tim Lester. The Brian Ferentz days of OC are done. They brought in a new offensive coordinator last year. They went from scoring 15 points a couple years ago to scoring 27 points a game last year. And they still didn't have a quarterback. Now they have Mark Gronowski, who you heard Trent say, obviously there's clearly an upgrade from most Iowa quarterbacks they've ever had. At least he is a competent quarterback. Last year, 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns, 7 picks at South Dakota State. The year before that, he had 3,000 yards, 29 picks, and 29 touchdowns, 5 picks. Yet South Dakota State, I know this is the Big Ten, but clearly the pedigree is a little bit more there. He did mention that the left tackle was an issue. Offensive line, hopefully, is an area that we can exploit them a little bit because we have size on our defensive line. But one thing I thought that was interesting is he mentioned on his defensive line, I asked him, like, well, how's your defense? As far as the defensive line goes, he said, no, it's amazing. You're not running on us. He basically was like, you're not running on us. Now, that was also because of what we saw last year. I don't know if Trent's really that familiar with our offensive line, but it's a fair point. Look, Iowa's a really stout team. They are what Wisconsin used to be. We were with them, high floor team that won 8 to 9 games a year. You heard him say that his prediction is 9 wins. Like, I understand where the optimism comes from Iowa. They do have to play Oregon. They have to play Penn State, but they don't have Ohio State. They don't have Michigan, I don't think. Like, I think that there is a reason for his optimism. Obviously, it's a home game for us, Justin. I really hope we can get it done. But what are your thoughts on Gronowski? Let's just start there. Like, do you think he can really be a guy for Iowa?
I think what they should be expecting from him is to see what Brosmer got at Minnesota last year.
Okay.
Expecting more than that is probably too much because number one, I think that at best, the receivers are going to be basically what Minnesota had last year and Daniel Jackson and the other guys that they had there. I don't buy it. Like, I just don't. I need to see Iowa prove that they have receivers that can actually do it. They typically have a tight end that's solid. But with Gronowski, there's a couple of different things that I look at that I see potentially maybe they're just happy to have somebody that's at least competent, which is he wasn't there for the spring. So familiarity and comfort within the system and just being timing and everything else, likely not where you'd quite like it to be, as opposed to, like, would we feel great about Billy coming in the fall here? And we'd probably be like, yeah, he could start, but I don't know how good I feel about him hitting the ground running and necessarily being super strong. And he's coming back off an injury. So I'm not saying that I don't think the passing game won't be better, because I think it will be for Iowa. What I am going to say is I think you're probably trading off in terms of what your run production was for passing yards, because I don't believe you're going to be you're not going to have an All-American running back again this next year. And as Wisconsin, we know better than anybody how big of a difference it can make between having a star and having somebody who's just simply solid. There's a huge difference in terms of what you can expect from those guys on a week-to-week basis. And I think that's why we're excited here, because we think Dylan Jones can be a star. That's somebody that can finally kind of get us headed back in the right direction in the running back room. I think number one for this game, for us at least, we will be used to their running style, probably more so than any team in the Big Ten, because we run the same offensive run game system. We're both wide zone teams. That's what Leicester runs too. It's what a lot of the NFL runs. And so we should be fairly comfortable as a defense being able to work against that. Same for them. But I also think that, as it's the reason why teams do it, and especially in the NFL, is it's very hard to get a feel for what the offense is trying to do and where they're going with things in this system, because there is a certain level of deception associated with it, which allows both Iowa last year and hopefully us this year being able to punish even a team that is very disciplined, which is, you may go to the right spot, but if we cut back against it, there's some openings there to exploit. And there's just some creativity to it. I do think that they will be good defensively, because they are every year. I can say the secondary we'll see what they turn into. Mm-hmm. But obviously they've been really, really good the last few years. The question is, can they be really, really good, or can they be good? Because that could be a substantial difference from them. I do think the defensive line is going to be solid to good for them. I question, as a team that had a very light defensive line last year, do they get hurt by it, or do they have the bodies that are big enough to hold up throughout an entire season? It doesn't sound like they have that middle of the run defense kind of plugger anymore. And that's a question that I have for them.
Yeah, look, I think Iowa is a really hard team to beat. That's what we were for a long time. And they have reloaded in key areas. They've recruited well over the years. They recruit to their system. Kirk Ferentz has a very distinct way of playing football. And that's why their floor is where it is. I think the secondary can be attacked potentially. I think if we've got, Vinny Anthony, and by this time, this is game 6 of the year. If Ballard and Anthony are doing what they need to do, and Tretch is exploiting people over the middle, and Lance Mason is someone that can be reckoned with, sure, I think we can potentially pass on them, because I do think Billy Edwards is going to be better than most people in the Big Ten think he's going to be. And we can do that. I think we can find ways to exploit them a little bit. Like him, I do think it's going to be tough to run the ball. I hear you on this, like, we've got experience, but so do they. Like, Iowa shuts down the run, and that's what Iowa does to a lot of teams. It's going to be a grinded out type of a game. The positive is in Madison. And when you look at the schedule this year, and I'm going to just pop it up just so everyone can see it again, like, this is that in that middle stretch, right, of 4 games. This is the one where you kind of be like, well, yes, Michigan might be a beatable team on the same level, but that's on the road. This is at home. Ohio State, not as beatable. So this is kind of one of those that you're like, boy, I hope we can get this game, right? I hope this is the one that we can get. And not to say that we need it, because there are other games on the schedule, but it's going to be tough if we don't get Iowa. And I think this is going to be tough. What's your confidence level about this game right now as it sits today?
I feel better about us being more balanced than them. I do think we have some playmakers that they don't have. I don't think they have somebody quite on the level of Vinny Anthony.
I agree with that.
I don't think they have a Dylan Jones level running back, even though I think they may have some guys that they feel pretty solid about.
Yeah, he said they have depth, but not necessarily the star. Yeah.
And so the way I look at this is really what I think it's probably going to come down to is the quarterback for each team. I think we probably are a tick lower than them on defense. I don't think that that's a shock to have that idea. Mm-hmm. But I think it will come down to who can make more plays. And I'm going to lean on us probably having a little bit more in terms of playmakers available to us. If we can stop their run game, I don't know what they do, because I don't know if they are, like, you brought Gronowski in. I don't know if you feel confident being able to lean on him and have him carry you in a game. This isn't South Dakota State.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about comparing the quarterbacks, because certainly while we both have transfers, our guy played in the conference at least. And I'm not saying he was great, but he had decent numbers playing for a really bad Maryland team. South Dakota State was a good team. I think they were a good team. I don't know what their record was.
They were good.
Obviously,
they were very good.
He hasn't played in the conference, and you don't know how that always translates over. They should be better than they have been in the past from a quarterback perspective, but so should we, right? We're going to be far better than we have been in the last year, certainly when we had Braden Locke going up against Iowa. We know that defensively we're stouter up front. They ran on us constantly. And really when we put bigger guys on the defensive line, we were actually able to shut them down a little bit at times. What we struggled with when we had 2 down linemen and we were trying to play with a smaller sort of 2-4, front look, that wasn't really going to work for us, and it didn't work for us. This year, we know that all those linemen are more stout. And even when you play, when you now have those different body types where you can put 4 down linemen that are pretty heavy there to provide a little bit more, stout up front, which I do think we're going to be better. We're not going to get beat 42-10 by this team.
I would be shocked if we have any other lineup other than starting being like either Perkins or Lane, Barton, and Walker, and then probably Riger on the edge as the guy who's more of an all-around rusher type. But that's 300-pounders in the middle of the defense. And then you have some linebackers that can really run. So you should be able to get downhill and attack this offense. I think we may be underselling this defense, but I don't want to get too high on them until we see it in the season. But there are ways to look at it where you can be like, this could translate. If the defensive line can at least take care of the offensive line and keep them off the linebackers, you can see us being able to have guys who can cause some havoc in that linebacker room. But we need to see it.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. That's the Iowa preview. We're going to be back again, of course, this weekend. I think Nick's coming on for week 3 of practice for his 3rd week in a row, which will be great. We're going to break down another week of practice, and we are inching so close to the start of the season. We will be seeing you again on the weekend. And as always, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.